Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. Boys and girls, with so much drama in the LBC, it's kind of hard being Sir Patrick M-A-C-K. It's M-A-C-K, actually, like Patrick, M-A-C-K. Today is the 17th. I know. Pretty sweet, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know who else knows? Joe Biden. He had something to say about it. Check it out.
What I think is important is we focus on why it's so important to remove this man from office. On the 17th, look. What we have to do now is focus on Donald Trump.
Okay, so that is mildly disturbing, to say the least. Now, if you saw the actual exchange, Biden was actually deflecting about his son, Hunter Biden, and saying how we need to focus on really getting rid of President Trump. And that seems to be what prompted whatever he was going to say about 17 or the 17th, whatnot. For those of you who are not understanding the reference, of course, the 17th letter of the alphabet is Q, which is what, of course, a lot of us think that could be a reference to. Could just be a reference to a date. But either way, he was referencing the 17th for something. Now, is that a potential surprise release for the IG report? Not really sure, but I think one of the curious things that a lot of us wanted to know is if this had anything to do with the upcoming rally for President Trump, which is happening in Dallas, which will be happening really, really soon by the time you're watching this video, actually. And I want to turn you on to something real quick that I found very suspicious in regards to that very notion. I want to take you to this article from the New York Times from the 12th entitled James, Nobody's Homie, Comey would like to help. The former FBI director wants an end to the Trump presidency. Yeah, we know that. And yes, he knows you might think he caused it. Yeah, we know that too. So New York Times telling us a lot of what we already know. But what we don't know is why is he doing this? And this particular picture was very, very curious. Now, if you're new to my channel, I would suggest going back through some of my older videos. But we have talked a lot about a lot of kind of dog whistling that James Comey, not just James Comey, but in particular James Comey, has been doing, particularly on Twitter. This led to a series of dog tweets and things like that. All kinds of these tweets. I've done multiple videos in regards to these dog tweets, and I've gotten a lot of criticism on it. However, I will say this. The confirmation that I've gotten comes from sources that far outweigh the criticism. So I'm clearly onto something here. We're clearly onto something here, but we're not exactly sure what. And I don't want to play too many games with this here, but I thought this was very curious. Now, let's take a look at this picture. Now, as you can see, nobody's homie is right there in the middle of his atrium, right there in his sweet little pad. And of course, they went through a lot of trouble to make sure that this picture looks beautiful, and it is a beautiful picture. But if you'll notice there in the foreground on the floor, there is a series of toys, and these are Star Wars toys. They almost look like they might be, I don't know if they're Legos, but they're Star Wars themed. And James Comey actually tweeted about these, saying they were his grandsons and he thought they looked cool. So obviously he was calling attention to them. Now, let's remember that we have an event coming up in Dallas, right? And it's going to be later today for most of you. And so we all know that something very significant happened a long, long time ago with another president in Dallas. And oddly enough, the layout of these toys and this, what do you call those things? The foot pillow things? Hammock? Hassock? Hammock? I can't remember what you call those darn things. The thing that you kick your feet up on. And it's right here in the foreground here. So if you'll notice, if we go back to the assassination of JFK, and this might be looking a little bit reachy here, but just hear me out. This area would have been that little grassy knoll area. And here's our perfect little turn right here. And if you'll look actually at those old pictures, you'll see that a lot of the press and everything was actually set up in this formation here. Now, I might be looking way into that, but I'm just pointing out. And I want to point out, too, that these are not just Lego Star Wars toys, but this particular one is the, I don't remember the name of this little rolling robot thing. It's like the modern version of R2-D2. But either way, then we have the Millennium Falcon here and an X-Wing fighter, and then what looks to be, I don't know, Jedis or whatever. But if you're not familiar with the movie, these are what are perceived in the movie as the good guys, and what they are the rebels. They're the Rebel Alliance, ganging up on the whole establishment, which looks to be over here, which might be symbolic to the Death Star. And in the movie Star Wars, that's essentially what they're trying to do, is to prevent the Imperialists from completing the Death Star, and they eventually destroy the Death Star. So anyway, I just wanted to make those analogies right there. I'm not saying that that's what it is, but if something cryptic is going to come, it's going to come from this dude right here, and it happens to come on a day like today. Meanwhile, House Democrats going absolutely ballistic over Trump, and yet they're saying that he's having a meltdown over Syria. And yeah, I got footage of that too.
You lose.
No, that's not the real footage. This is the real footage.
Speaker, you just on the part of the president was a meltdown. Sad to say.
Madam Speaker, you just said the president is not relaying to...
It did not come up. It did not come up. No, it did not come up. It did not come up.
But he called you a communist? He didn't
call us.
Madam Speaker, you just said earlier that...
Just clarify that. He said the communists are taking over...
Some of ISIS were
communists, and you...
Okay, so yeah, I did nothing to that video. The first one, I may have edited. The second one, not at all. That's exactly how that ended. And if you watched it, that's exactly what you saw. Very uncomfortable indeed. And of course, Democrats are in a panic. The threat of this IG report once again being held over their heads. And we've seen this for so long. And for some reason, it keeps prompting more defensive maneuvers. So lots going on. But evidently, they're just going to go ahead and move the goalposts here. They're not willing to take an impeachment vote. They are saying that, they're just kind of trying to shift the narrative now to Syria because the impeachment thing once again has fallen on its face. So I don't want to go way into that because I think we're kind of inundated with news. I really want to follow up on this story from the other day and why I think it's important. Now, if you've not seen my last video entitled "An App for That" in Pursuit of Truth Presents, it was from the 14th. We were talking about this tech entrepreneur by the name of Erin Valenti. I just showed you right here. Here she is. This is her Twitter. I want to talk more about her, but if you've not seen that video, I highly suggest you check it out. There were a lot of crazy connections that we found, and I want to expand on some of those today and why I think it's relevant. But this Erin Valenti, she was a CEO of this Tinker Ventures. We'll talk briefly about that, but I want to start you over here on her Twitter page. Now, I want to point out this Erin Valenti, who had been missing, was looking. She was visiting some friends, and then she was supposed to fly back from Northern California back to Salt Lake City, and where she lives in Utah and runs a lot of these app startups. Now, she had a lot of interesting connections. We're going to talk about some more of those too, but she turned up missing. And they put on a search, and then they called off the search, but police have not yet identified the body. But the family has called off the search and has kind of thanked everybody and said, obviously, it's not the result we'd like to have, but thanks to everybody. So they seem to have some sort of finality, but for some reason, the police have not come out yet to officially say it. I think that's a little bit curious. I found a lot of curious things with this story. So if you've not watched that previous video, please do. Now, in perusing through her Twitter page, she doesn't have a whole lot, but I was able to follow her back to about 2015. And as you can see here from February 1st, this is from an Overstock after party. And she did some work with Overstock, which we are going to talk about today. A lot of you asked me about that, and I wanted to get a little bit more time to look into this, but indeed she did. But here she is at an after party, oddly enough, to party packed with people for a company called Overstock. And I think that's funny. Anyway, and here's another one from April 17th. I know, but it was 2015. Excited to attend the first ever White House tech meetup. Check out the live stream from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Okay, so she has done a little political stuff. It's not particularly political. They're just meeting at the White House. But in looking through her social media profile, I didn't see a whole lot of political stuff right up until the very end, where we see this from September 25th, where she retweets Hillary Clinton's tweet. The President of the United States has betrayed our country. That's not a political statement. It's a harsh reality, and we must act. He is a clear and present danger to the things that keep us strong and free. I support impeachment. As you can see, on the 25th, she retweeted, but we see the very next day here on the 26th, she retweets the same tweet and just says what she said. All right, well, fair enough. She's obviously a Hillary Clinton supporter, and it doesn't surprise me. A lot of tech people tend to be Democrats, so this isn't very surprising. But this was her very last tweet. I found it very interesting that she retweeted this one again, seeing as, like I said, she wasn't very political up until the 25th, or at least her tweets were, I should say. Her tweets weren't political, but all of a sudden, right before her being missing, she does get a little political. And then this is another one here from the 27th. We should be all listening to this perfect song right now, Impeach Trump, and it's entitled Arrest the President, from rapper Ice Cube. Now let's go back to our girl Erin Valenti, missing at 33 years old. And this is a very talented woman. This is no dummy right here. College educated. She's developed a ton of different startups. She's also a psychologist. She was studying Chinese. She was dealing with real estate. She was a financial analyst. This is a very, very talented woman with a lot of interesting connections. And I want to add on here, but let's start off with her experience. As you can see there, the founder, CEO, and managing director of Tinker. And I just want to recap real quick. This is another tech company. Here is one of their tweets from 2018. Thanks to the amazing Polly who hooked me up with this one. But there's a lot of this really interesting stuff. How about this? Telepathy being real. Are you ready? Seems like there's a better way to do that without all the hardware. I'm just saying. Anyway, so Tinker was up to some really strange stuff, and I think it truly matters, and we're going to show you why. But I just want to point out that this looks to be some sort of like, whether it's voice-to-skull technology, who knows, but it looks really, really suspect, right? This stuff's going straight into your brain. Now we see SLC Tech startups, which you talked about. Skycrane, which looked to be kind of like a human resources app, helps people find jobs within tech startups and things like that. And then Summit Partners, I went into a great deal in the last video, so please go check that out. But some of this was some really, really interesting real estate stuff, which we've also been talking about as of late. But within Summit Partners and Medici, which we're also going to talk about, there were a ton of these different medical supply apps. There were all kinds of really, really interesting stuff, and many of these tech startups were even kind of working down to the basic DNA level. And we've talked a lot about how that matters when it comes to managing your data, and how all these major tech people are always invested in the same things, and they all come back to data, whether it's your DNA, your financial data, your payment mobile data. All that stuff is connected. And then we get to Overstock.com. And of course, I think many of you thought what I thought too, even though we didn't talk about it in the last video. Does this woman have a relation to CEO Patrick Byrne? We're going to talk a little bit about that too. But I want to point out that I actually did touch on this a little bit, and let me show you how. Now we're over on the WomenTechCouncil.com. It says at Tinker, Erin manages a global team of 120 employees across their Salt Lake City and Lahore, Pakistan offices. And I just want to point out that although a lot of Pakistan companies get outsourced from the US, it's not necessarily that strange. I do want to mention that we had this really, really interesting cryptic tweet from Bloomberg the other day on the 12th, right before she went missing. And they were talking about how Pakistan was kind of a cool place for young women travelers. And of course, we all know that's not true. Ladies, if you're planning on going on a little excursion, may I suggest someplace other than Pakistan? I'm not hating on Pakistan, but at the same time, I'm also not suggesting you go there alone. And that was the general result when you look at the comments down below. That was a very odd tweet, and I found it very odd coming in to context with the situation that we had this week. But anyway, Tinker has built over 700 products, including mobile apps. And somebody told me this was SaaS applications, tech-enabled marketplaces, and consumer websites. She has worked for brands including Facebook. And again, Facebook goes right back to that thing, one of the ultimate spying devices. We talked about its relation with LifeLog at great length. Skull Candy. Just think of the name there, Skull Candy. These are the headphones, but just think of the name, Skull Candy. Live Nation, Pearson, Metro PCS, and several emerging startups. She is currently focused on developing software and product development training programs, rapidly scaling revenue, and launching a web content series on innovation and creativity. Okay, sounds pretty techy. Prior to forming Tinker, she was the head of product development for Overstock.com. Okay, so this was a big deal, head of product development for Overstock.com. Now, I don't see anything that's really standing out as far as connections directly to Patrick Byrne, but I would imagine that he would have at least known who she was if she was head of product development. Now, that's not to say that they were close or they were friends. It wouldn't surprise me either way if they A, had met, or B, had never met. I think it's very possible they'd never met. But we are going to show some connections. I just want to point out that I didn't see anything direct as of now. That may change. Some more stuff may come in. Maybe some people will find something online. But as of now, I haven't seen anything. But I would assume if you're a CEO of a corporation, you probably at least know who the head of product development is, even if you haven't met them or didn't hire them yourself. So I'm just allowing for possibilities either way. But the point is that she was there, and she did have a pretty big responsibility. She oversaw a team of 250 engineers. She helped form Overstock's internal corporate venture capital group. And that's why I would think that there's a chance that they probably would have met. Because I would imagine if you're working for Overstock and you're trying to take over these companies or acquire these other companies, this was the person that is going to kind of help you do that. And she seems like a very bright person, somebody who knows how to acquire these things. We talked about it a lot in the last video. Now Medici Ventures. And we did talk about Medici Ventures. We talked about quite a few different ones. So watch the last video if you haven't. By leading the first 5 investments in blockchain companies. All right, so I want to talk a little bit more about this. These are some of the companies from Medici. And as you can see, there are a lot of tech ones. All these are the blockchain companies. Now, it looked like it started out with 5. Looks like they've grown. And we're going to talk about a few. But in particular, I want to point out Medici Land Governance, using blockchain and other technologies to bring property ownership information to light and connect it to the global economy. Okay, and this one right here is online payment, just like I was talking about with Jack Dorsey over there with Square, Suhail Rizvi. They're all starting to get into these different mobile payment systems. Now this one tends to be a blockchain one. This one here is called T0, working on new technology that allows the trade of security tokens in an easy, compliant, and user-friendly manner. Now this one is a settlement one. Looks like it helps people do settlement claims and things like that using blockchain technology. But and I also want to point out that this mines. A lot of you guys are using this. This looks to be one of those new platforms. This was another one of these. And of course, being a blockchain technology, it doesn't necessarily surprise me that this would fall under it. I want to point out that I don't think that these are all suspect. I just want to point out that they are all blockchain. But in particular, what I want to turn your attention on to are these right here. We have Votum. Votum's goal is to make mobile voting a reality. Let me say that again, loud and clear. Votum's goal is to make mobile voting a reality. In 2015, they held a worldwide challenge for experts to create a hack-proof voting system. Out of 110 submissions from 32 countries, the winning solution was a blockchain system. Surprise, surprise. And then let's go over here to this one here, because this is the one I really want to talk about, is Votes. The minds behind Votes intend to redefine how the world votes by replacing long lines and outdated voting systems with everyday smart devices with biometric ID and blockchain irrefutability to provide accurate and tamper-free voting. Well, surely an online voting app is just what we need, he said sarcastically. Yeah, sounds pretty sketch, right? I think we all know that at the end of the day, a good old-fashioned paper ballot is the way to go. Now, I want to take you over to FinanceYahoo.com. And this was just from a few days ago, October 10th. During the 2018 midterm elections, somebody tried to hack votes. Mystic Mac! The blockchain-based voting system used by West Virginia. The attack was unsuccessful, but is under investigation by the FBI, said Andrew Warner, West Virginia's Secretary of State, in an October 1st press conference. In last year's election, we detected activity that may have been an attempt to penetrate West Virginia's mobile voting process, said Warner. No penetration occurred, and the security protocols to protect our election process worked as designed. The IP addresses from which the attempts were made have been turned over to the FBI for investigation. The investigation will determine if crimes were committed. Now it says here the hacking attempt may have stemmed from an election security class at the University of Michigan, CNN reported on Friday, October 4th. Last November, 144 West Virginian voters, including active members of the U.S. military serving overseas, used Boston-based Votes, a blockchain-enabled smartphone and application, to cast their ballots for the Senate and House of Representatives, as well as for state and local offices. That's a small number, but could be consequential, especially in close races. And that kind of says it all, right? That's a small number, but could be consequential, considering all the different ways that it seems that House Democrats are trying to mess with the elections. 4 seats in West Virginia's House of Delegates were decided by less than 150 votes. So that kind of says it all, like I said. But here's more that really kind of shows what we're talking about. Through votes, users must verify their identities using multi-factor authentication. Did I say authentication? Authentication and facial recognition software. Sorry, English is not my first language. Then they can access their ballots and submit their votes. The system also uses a paper trail for backup. However, researchers worry votes setup provides insufficient security. Okay, now check this out. I have not seen an argument that their system provides software independence, and Votes did not respond when I asked about this, said Ka-Ping Yi, a researcher who previously reviewed election system technology for the Secretary of State of California. Their frequently asked questions mentions that ballots are printed out, but it doesn't appear that the voter gets to verify the printout. His concerns have been echoed by other voting experts, including Matt Blaze, a computer science and law professor at Georgetown University Law Center. Remember that, Georgetown University Law Center. We have a computer science and law professor who happens to be a voting expert. And finally, let me leave you with this. In June, Votes raised $7 million to continue working on its software. And before that, the company raised $2.2 million from the venture division of Overstock.com. Remember, this is a subsidiary of Overstock that this Valenti helped acquire. In August, Overstock CEO Patrick Byrne abruptly resigned after revealing his relationship with Maria Butina, a woman who pled guilty to being a Russian agent. Okay, so our plot thickens. And before I attempt to kind of sum it up, I want to share with you this other app entitled Votum. I don't want to go way into this one. It's a fairly similar thing, but in a different way. These are the different services here: Civic, Blockchain Research Institute. But it starts to get a little sketchy right here. National Association of Secretaries of State, National Association of State Election Directors, Election Center, International Association of Government Officials, and the Chamber of Digital Commerce. Okay, well, on its face, it just sounds like it's blockchain stuff for a bunch of government authorities and things like that. But in looking at this right here, the International Association of Government Officials, this looks to be a bunch of former government officials, and it looks like a way where they can still have influence without actually still being in office. Now, I don't want to completely levy any accusations here. I'm just showing you that it's kind of what it looks like to me. But a lot of these different systems, tons of different strange ones: Harris Recording Solutions, Helion Software, Profile Technologies, Perpetual Storage, Simplifile LLC, Tyler Technologies, US Imaging, and then of course Votes, which is a part of this whole thing. So don't know enough yet. But I want to say that really what I am seeing is that it doesn't seem to be, it seems to be focused more on former government officials. That doesn't mean that current ones aren't in there, but it seems like there were former ones, which kind of suggests something very strange to me. But let's get back to Erin Valenti, because I want to kind of paint this picture here. Erin holds a BS in business administration, summa cum laude, from Georgetown University, where she majored in finance and international business. Well, that would explain why she knows so much about investing and things like that. And so that doesn't really surprise me. But I want to point out that she graduated from Georgetown University, just like our political experts over there, who were actually computer science experts, not political science experts. They were computer science experts, but were also voting experts. I wonder if Erin is also a voting expert. Hint, hint, wink, wink, right? Don't know. But I find it very curious that her last couple tweets had to do with Hillary Clinton. But what we do know is she went to Georgetown University, and that does lend to where I want to go. All this seems to suggest, from the apps to the, like I showed you, the telepathy stuff, the mind control stuff, the skull candy, the Facebook connections, LifeLog, data, social media, apps, land acquisition, voting. So many different connections are starting to come back to this young tech startup who they don't want to talk about at all, who just went missing. Well, her family sure was looking for her. So this was a big deal. Now, I don't exactly know where the connections are here, but what this suggests to me is some possible MK Ultra. Like I said, looks to be some sort of voice to skull technology that they're dabbling in here. Look at my last video to kind of see, the tech aspect of what we were talking about. But there was a lot of things going on through these apps. And remember, one of the last things that she said as she was bouncing around visiting friends before she was supposed to fly back was that we were living in the Matrix, and that was really worrying her parents. That's why they thought she was in trouble in the first place. What did she mean we're living in the Matrix? Is it possible that she was facilitating this all the time and was just discovering this? Not really sure, but I want to let you know exactly why we're talking about MK Ultra here. She attended Georgetown University. Well, surely Georgetown University doesn't have anything to do with MK Ultra, does it? Or does it? This is from the Washington Post from way back in the day, 1977. The CIA used the University of Maryland and George Washington University for some of its top MK Ultra experiments in behavior control in the 1950s and 1960s. The agency has informed both universities. The CIA also officially informed Georgetown University that it had sheltered some of the MK Ultra experiments. Georgetown's part in the project had been previously reported but not officially confirmed. The three local universities were among 80 private and public institutions told in the past few days they had played parts, some wittingly, some not, in the MK Ultra tests. Okay, so back in the 70s, they were coming out saying that were 80, at least 80. That was the ones that they told about. This was back in the 70s, talking about the 50s and 60s. So imagine where we are right now. But we know that Georgetown University was one of them, and we do know that it is possible. Now, what about our Overstock boy, Patrick Byrne? Well, he studied around quite a few universities. He's a smart guy, and he got his PhD from Stanford. Well, certainly Stanford wouldn't be wrapped up in this knuckleheadedry. Or would it? This is from 2018 from History.com, which is getting better ratings than CNN right now, talking about MK Ultra. And I don't want to go way through this right now. But again, it talks about the 50s and 60s. This was in response. Alan Dulles, director of the CIA-approved Project MK Ultra in 1953. The covert operation aimed to develop techniques that could be used against Soviet bloc enemies to control human behavior with drugs and other psychological manipulators. Well, keep in mind, our Stanford boy was dating a Russian girl that was trying to drum up information on Trump. How about that? But let me take you down to what the point I'm trying to make here. Under the auspices of Project MKUltra, the CIA began to fund studies at Columbia University, Stanford University, and other colleges on the effects of the drug. After a series of tests, the drug was deemed too unpredictable for use in counterintelligence. Okay, so at the end of the day, all I'm really trying to suggest here is that it's possible. It looks like both our cats have gone to universities where it was possible and where it was admitted to be used. If they're going to admit it on history.com, imagine what it is that they won't tell us, right? But the fact of the matter is that it's possible. And given all these different apps, all these different investments that we're seeing that fell under overstock.com, and not only just under overstock.com, but related to this missing Aaron Valenti, who is either dead or missing, but either way, they called off the search, right? Either way. It seems to get clearer and clearer that it's not only possible, but it almost seems probable at this point. Remember, this girl was searching around for friends when she was supposed to be heading back. Was she looking for help? And what was this matrix that she was talking about? Especially considering all these things were, she was an app person. She couldn't get anybody to locate her on one of her fancy apps. She didn't have any kind of GPS on her phone. She had a cell phone, right? She was obviously making calls, so something's very strange. And I also want to rememberize you about a story that I believe I'm the only person who's talked about other than the basic reporting of this. If you'll remember early on in Trump's presidency, and I'm sorry I'm doing this from memory right now, but you'll remember this story and you can go look it up. A man drove onto the White House lawn and he had a gun. And a lot of the different media conglomerates just kind of reported that, and that the security ended up shooting him dead and this and that. But what only one outlet, oddly enough, I believe it was ABC, and I'm sorry, don't quote me, but you can go back and you can see I reported on this a couple of times. This guy got out of his car with his gun, and he didn't attempt to shoot at the White House. He didn't attempt to shoot at the security. He didn't attempt to kill anybody. He didn't attempt to kill himself. He shot at his phone. He made a point to go to the front of the White House, get out of his car, put his phone down, and shoot at the phone. He was screaming at the phone. And only one media group even reported that at all and then got right off it. We never heard this story again. But I want to remind you that this stuff is possible. And it seems now that we even have some suspicious voting behavior going on. And it may even have to do with the resignation of this Patrick Byrne. Okay, so is it possible that our boy Patrick Byrne, who made a decision a while back to come clean? And if you'll remember, he went on all the different news channels talking about his affair with Maria Butina, who did plead guilty for conspiracy. She failed to register as a foreign agent. And we're seeing a lot of that. That was a very similar thing that brought down Tony Podesta. But we've seen a lot of this, right? Well, it looked like she was a spy. She got in this sort of romantic relationship with him. And here he was on all the news stations coming clean about it. You may remember it. It was very, very odd, right? And it almost seemed too strange to believe, except for one key part that I'd like to rememberize you about. Nobody, and I mean nobody, contradicted him. And still to this day, nobody's contradicted his story. Now, he said he kind of drummed up this relationship, obviously through mutual friends. She was at parties and whatever. She kind of came on to him, typical sort of thing, right? But as it got a little bit heavier, he was saying he realized there was more to this, and she was trying to get at Trump. And although he wasn't really a Trump fan, he realized that something was really, really wrong here. And that is when he went to all these news stations. And if you remember watching this, you can kind of see he has sort of a fear about him. He has sort of a resignation about him. Clearly, he was in the wrong about something, and he almost feels like he's doing this to get off his chest. Is he reconciling somehow? And if this is indeed a Russian plant, and we know this Butina was part of the Russian Federation, basically essentially Putin's political party, right? We know this to be true. Would this bring in any kind of MKUltra ideals, considering Byrne's not only his education, but his higher education at Stanford, which was not only MKUltra directed, but counter-operational towards Russian ops? Just saying. It all seems to lay itself out really, really neatly. And is that why intelligence officials, like he claimed, approached him about keeping the relationship going? Was that why they did it? Hard to really say. But my guess is that although, again, and I never like to say black hat, white hat, I think what we have here is Patrick Byrne. What we do know is that he had tons and tons of data. You can think back to his issue with gradient analytics. This had to do with fixing prices and stuff like that. He's been wrapped up in tons and tons of data. And I just showed you the connections here to this vote that we already know was hacked and we already know seemed to look like it was coinciding with his resignation. So did he get caught doing some voting knuckleheadedry? And in order to reconcile, comes out with this story that nobody has yet to refute. How it leads up to this Aaron Valenti, I'm not really sure, but I'm showing you some clear-cut connections. And then again, we have this Aaron Valenti, who seems to be very aware of technology, how it works, blockchain, finances, real estate, knows a little bit of Chinese. She seems to be pretty smart. And remember, as much as they want to sell her as this young tech startup, she was staying at the Ritz. That's what they reported. She was staying at the Ritz. She wasn't staying at the Holiday Inn Express. She wasn't even staying at like a Hilton or a Hyatt. She was staying at the Ritz. All right? Now let me take you to the Googly map real quick here. Valenti had made some calls. And where it started to go south, or at least from according to the story, where it seems to have gone south, she was making some calls from this Sand Hill Road, which is right here along the top center left of your screen here. And it's near Sand Hill School, which is, of course, nearby. But this Sand Hill Road seems to be where she was around Palo Alto. And if you remember, this is where it kind of went south for the parents, where they realized that she was in trouble. She was, talking about the Matrix and this and that, and kind of babbling on, and then they thought that she needed some help. And she had also said that she couldn't find her car. So they were definitely panicked here. But the reason I'm bringing you back here is that, yes, this is Palo Alto, California. And I would imagine if she's coming off a Sand Hill Road, is it possible at all that she was coming directly from the nearest university, being at the bottom of your screen here, Stanford University? Now, let me leave you with one last thing. This is from deepcapture.com, which is actually the website of Patrick Byrne. And this is from a recent bit that he wrote on the 13th. And it's actually a pretty interesting article. I'll leave it for you down below. It's kind of personal, talks a little bit about his pros and cons, how he feels personally about President Trump. But overall, it's pretty fair. But I want to just read this little part here in section 2, where he says, in 2005, I began to understand how the oligarchy was looting the savings of America via the settlement system. I tried to expose it and discovered that the institutions that should have been interested were either disinterested or adversarial. Exploring that subject gave birth to Deep Capture. Readers of this website will remember the stories from back then. How yellow was the journalism, how NPC was the babble through, which I had to cut, so it does not bear repeating. There were but 2 exceptions. Okay, well, I'll let you read the rest there. But he discovered this back in 2005 through the settlement system. And of course, he would know. Like I said, he was part of the gradient analytics and whatnot. He was very privy to a ton of information, and he knew President Trump for a long time. As a matter of fact, he mentions that in the beginning of this article. And of course, I want to take you back to Medici Ventures, which was the very kind of umbrella company that was, these were all the what's the blockchain? I want to call it hashgraph. Blockchain technologies that they were acquiring. And of course, one right here was this settlement. So we do know that Aaron Valenti was facilitating, at least in part, some of this for Overstock.com for Patrick Byrne. Does it lead to any sort of knuckleheadedry that would have caused him to turn his head on the story? Not really sure, but I have a feeling the answers are in here somewhere. All right, Patriots, that's all I got for you for now. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who do that already. If you're new to my channel, welcome to you. Please understand that all those things I just asked you to do will probably get undone from time to time. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. You know whose fault it is. They do it on purpose. So do me a favor, just keep checking back, re-click yourself, re-notify yourself, resubscribe yourself. I highly suggest bookmarking my page if you have trouble finding my videos. That will probably help you. All my alternate links are down below. That will also help you in case anything goes down on YouTube. You can be subscribed somewhere else. All those links are down below. Gab, BitChute, DropSpace. Yeah, DropSpace. I don't know what they all are. They're all down below, and I talk about it every day. Over on Gab, I'm IPOT1776, and on Twitter, I'm also IPOT1776. And they're all linked down below. If you want to send me any messages or info, please email me. That's also down below. And if you're old school, want to send me something old school, my P.O. box is down below. And if you'd like to support the channel, my Patreon link is down below too. All those links are down below, as well as to the links for the from some of the show notes today. All right, Patriots, this is Sir Patrick Mack. I'm going to go stick my nose where it don't belong. Till next time, stay pursued it.